At age 27, Hannibal is already a legendary military tactician.
In less than 2 years, Hannibal has handed Rome 3 catastrophic defeats. 2,000 men at Ticinus, 30,000 at Trebia, and now 15,000 more at Trasimene. Rome had never seen such a series of defeats in its history.
In the face of this defeat, the Roman Senate makes a bold, perhaps desperate decision. They vote to appoint a temporary dictator over the military to put an end to Hannibal's reign of terror. He is Quintus Fabius Maximus.
Selecting a dictator is extremely rare in Roman history. They highly value their republic, and so the idea of handing absolute power to one man isn't taken lightly. In fact, the position came with an automatic time limit of 6 months.
Fabius raises an army of 90,000 men, the largest yet in Roman history. But he isn't going to use them in direct combat against Hannibal.
Fabius is an excellent strategic thinker. He takes one look around, looks at the Roman manpower, naval resources, food resources, the geography, and then compares them with Hannibal's small army, away from home, can't resupply, no navy. He concludes quite correctly that Hannibal can't win, that essentially there's no point to continue to try to defeat Hannibal in the field.
And this becomes the famous Fabian strategy. Do not engage the enemy in head-to-head battle. Harass him. When he sends foraging teams to look for food, kill them. If anybody provides sanctuary in a small town, burn the place down.
Fabius's strategy leaves Hannibal and his men hungry and tired. They are constantly hunted and harassed and never able to resupply.
Fabius' strategies were not only good, they were exactly the strategy that Rome needed to stop a man like Hannibal, whose whole tactical and strategic vision was based on fighting battles. To have a strategy that's battle-centric, you have to have an enemy who obliges. By refusing to give battle, Fabius denied Hannibal to fight the war that he wanted to fight.
This is a strategy that would work, but the problem is, like all strategy, it depends on political will. It depends on the political will of the Senate to essentially continue the Fabian strategy, perhaps for 3, 4, 5 years. Well, what happens is, this is not the Roman way.
Despite the strategy's success so far, the impatient Roman Senate forces Fabius to resign after 6 months. They return to their more typical mode of government with the election of 2 civilian co-consuls. Paulus and Varro are chosen and directed to defeat Hannibal as quickly as possible. Varro wants to fight Hannibal in an all-out war. Paulus, however, does not want to be lured into battle.
This is problematic because there's a combination of 2 Roman armies. The 2 co-consuls, Paulus and Varro, trade off command every other day. It may sound insane, but one day Paulus was the supreme commander, the next day Varro. Hannibal is well aware of this and knows who he'd rather fight.
Hannibal's strength is in face-to-face combat, and he wants to fight Varro's war. Hannibal gathers his intelligence, lies in wait, then sends in a strike team just as Varro takes command. On cue, Varro roars into action and sends a fighting force to meet Hannibal near Cannae, Italy. Varro's colossal army is made up of more than 80,000 Roman and allied foot soldiers and 6,000 cavalry. It is the most massive Roman fighting force ever to take the field at one time. Varro arranges his soldiers in a typical Roman maniple formation, but adds a new twist to the old formula.
What they do is they pack themselves a little tighter than before so that the front is shorter, but the depth is thicker.
Only 300 feet away, Hannibal deploys his own infantry force of 35,000, but in a unique configuration, never before used on any Western battlefield.
Normally, an infantry line would be deployed straight. He deploys it in a concave bow, with the belly of the bow facing closest to the Roman lines in a kind of semicircle.
Hannibal himself leads the infantry force from the middle of the line. The Battle of Annihilation begins. infantry battle is fierce. But it's the Carthaginian cavalry that scores the first punishing blow.
Heavy cavalry smashes into the Roman cavalry with such incredible force that it shatters it. I mean, between the dead and the wounded and the dead horses, the rest just take flight.
Trying to outrun this tidal wave of death, the Romans are chopped down in full stride. It is the beginning of one of the greatest battles of all time. It's the Second Punic War between Carthage and Rome. Two great armies slaughter each other on the plains of Cannae, battling over who will control the entire Mediterranean region. Hannibal has configured his army in a unique semicircle. On the flanks, the Carthaginian cavalry commander detaches part of his force to help the Numidian light cavalry on the opposite side of the battlefield.
With a nearly 4-to-1 advantage, the Carthaginian cavalry makes short work of the Roman cavalry on the flanks.
In the center, the Roman infantry drives Hannibal back. But it's a ruse. Hannibal is giving ground on purpose.
And this is why Hannibal originally assembled his men in a semicircle. He knew that the center would give ground, and he knew his flanks would hold. Slowly the center collapses, and the Romans would think they're winning and commit more troops in the center.
The original bow shape of the Carthaginian line now resembles a V.
As Hannibal's infantry flexes inward, the Roman units are drawn deeper and deeper into a V-shaped line. And as they go further, they get completely packed together.
Pressed into this V, the Roman infantry can only move in one direction, straight ahead.
Livy, one of the Roman historians, tells us the pressure was so great that Roman soldiers' arms were forced against their bodies. They could not lift their swords.
On Hannibal's signal, the African phalanxes turn in toward the middle and crush the Romans from the sides. Hannibal blocks in front. The African infantry squeezes the side. Hannibal's older brother, Hasdrubal, uses cavalry to slash from behind. The Romans are jammed into a kill box.
Hasdrubal the Brilliant now rides around in back of the Romans, hits them in the rear. This is a famous double envelopment. It had never been done in the history of warfare before. Never. And it's a brilliant maneuver.
What Hannibal realized is that while the Roman army is nearly unstoppable as it attacks straight ahead, its mandibles can only move forward and back. They cannot turn and they cannot envelop. And if you know exactly how your enemy is going to fight, it's not that hard to figure out how to defeat it.
By the time the sun sets, Hannibal has slaughtered an unbelievable number of Romans.
The Battle of Cannae was so full of death that it gave rise to a new term in military terminology. It's called the Battle of Annihilation. The Battle of Annihilation. The enemy wasn't defeated, it was annihilated.
Cannae ranks as one of the deadliest and most brutal battles in history. More than 70,000 Romans are butchered in a single day.
70,000 dead, killed in an area only twice the size of Central Park. Ask yourself, this is an age before mechanical weapons. How long does it take to kill 70,000 human beings with swords and spears, one at a time? The answer seems to be about 6 hours.
Hannibal is on the verge of realizing his dream of Rome's destruction. But the victory at Cannae will actually mark the end of Hannibal's military success on the Italian peninsula.
After the battle, the commander of the Numidian cavalry, Maharbal, urges Hannibal to march immediately on Rome. But Hannibal refuses. This leads Maharbal to exclaim, "Hannibal, you know how to conquer, but you do not know how to use your victories."
Hannibal might believe that Rome will finally bow before him and surrender after their devastating defeat.
Or maybe he realizes a siege of Rome will be impossible to maintain without reinforcements and supplies. Cannae is about 260 miles away from Rome, so he gets close, but not close enough.
Whatever the reason, the destruction at Cannae is the closest Hannibal ever gets to fulfilling the blood oath of revenge he made to his father.
Hannibal does try to negotiate a peace deal with the Romans after Cannae, but the Romans refuse. In fact, the Romans actually outlaw the word peace. No citizen could ever consider it out loud.
Ultimately, the Romans decide to return to the Fabian strategy of containment. Instead of trying to beat Hannibal on the battlefield, they will try to outlast him.
Think about this for a minute. Rome, with all their imperial destructive ways, says, you know what? We can't beat this guy. We can only harass him. We can only contain him.
Hannibal was able to get many of the southern Italian towns to defect to him, so he was able to live off the land. But try as he might, he can never fulfill his oath to his father. He never burns Rome to the ground.
For all his triumphs on the battlefield, Hannibal's campaign must be seen as a failure. He eventually abandons his quest to destroy Rome and sails back to Carthage. They vote to appoint a temporary dictator over the military to put an end to Hannibal's reign of terror. He is Quintus Fabius Maximus.
Selecting a dictator is extremely rare in Roman history. They highly value their republic.
He isn't going to use them in direct combat against Hannibal.
Fabius is an excellent strategic thinker. He takes one look around, looks at the Roman manpower, naval resources, food resources, the geography, and then compares them with...
And so the idea of handing absolute power to one man isn't taken lightly. In fact, the position came with an automatic time limit of 6 months.
Fabius raises an army of 90,000 men, the largest yet in Roman history. But he...
3,000 at Trebia, and now 15,000 more at Trasimene. Rome had never seen such a series of defeats in its history.
In the face of this defeat, the Roman Senate makes a bold, perhaps desperate decision. At age 27, Hannibal is already a legendary military tactician.
In less than 2 years, Hannibal has handed Rome 3 catastrophic defeats. 2,000 men at Ticinus, 30